Hello, everybody. This is LZ Holt here, and this is my update for December the 23rd, I do believe. We're getting nearer the end of 2019, and I want to talk today about one of the movies I anticipated the most in 2019, which is The Irishman. It came out actually last month. Um, Man, what a movie. We're going to try and talk about it, but before we get into all the details of this film, let me introduce Rebecca Ivey, you all know,
Yes, hello.
and joining me again for the first time in a minute is my old buddy Ryan Reyonec. What's up, Al?
Infinity pool in the front.
I have my own line that I've forgotten that I need to do there. What's the other part of it?
Chick at the pool with the Mac. I can't remember the whole. I haven't heard the whole song.
Let's do this
But
again.
yeah, I need to get the whole song because I just love that Sports Center commercial.
Yeah, we've been he's gotten me sort of obsessing about the Sports Center commercial that he showed me that I'd never seen. But for those of you who haven't seen it, we'll jump into this show here about The Irishman. We're going to start out talking about Frank Sheeran. He is the star of The Irishman, not the actor, but he is the main character. He's played by Robert De Niro in the movie. And The Irishman really is the story of Frank Sheeran. Even though it has a lot of other characters in it that are of note, Jimmy Hoffa, of course, Russell Buffalino, Angelo Bruno. But really, The Irishman is about this guy, Frank Sheeran, who was born October the 25th, 1920, in a place called Darby, Pennsylvania, which is a suburb, working-class suburb of Philadelphia. His father, Tom, was a house painter, which is kind of funny, considering the name of the book that was eventually written. But before I go into that too deeply, let me just say Tom was an actual house painter. He did the real house painting, right? His mother was Frank did another kind of house painting, which we'll explain here in a minute. But his mother was Mary, who was a housewife, and they were of Irish descent, which is how Frank eventually, down the road, got his nickname on the streets, which was Frank the Irishman Sheeran. Because he was his Irish ancestry. Actually, his mother was from Sweden, I believe, originally. But his father was Irish. He enlisted in the Army August of 1941, and he was assigned to military police. So Frank was a military policeman. 1941 was pre-Pearl Harbor. So when Pearl Harbor happened, naturally, he was sent to war. He was transferred to the 45th Infantry Division, also known as the Thunderbirds. So Frank was a Thunderbird. They also called themselves the Killer Division because these guys their boots were in the on the ground. They were fighting the front lines in World War II. And Frank wound up actually serving 4 times the average combat days that someone in the Army served at that time, which was usually around 100 combat days. Frank served over 411 combat days.
Wait, how is that possible?
I don't know.
Wars lasted for years back then. You would think the numbers would be so much higher.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. If you think about it, he was well over a year, which is how Frank wound up getting. He was involved with the Italian campaign. He was involved with the landings in South France. And he was involved.
And I want to make it clear too. I'm not being disrespectful. Like 100 days of someone shooting at you is a lot, But I'm saying, but when war is going for years, like I had never heard these numbers before. I when you just said that, I was like, what? I didn't even know how.
Yeah, at that point in time in World War II, the average. Now this is an average, of course, so I'm sure some served, some slightly more, slightly less. But the average soldier served around 100 days combat time. Now I don't realize how Frank.
I guess that's death, though. I guess in war like that, you gotta. It's just. I guess it's because of death. Death is gonna take all the averages down.
I guess so. Yeah, probably. Yeah.
I had just never considered it before until you threw that number out there.
Well, like I say, Frank was out there so long, he moved from Italy to France and then eventually into the invasion of Germany. So he kind of did the whole European theater during World War II. And later in his life, he talked about some of the things that happened to him in WW2, and he admitted to participating in war crimes. He admitted in participating in quite a few revenge killings in the heat of battle. He talked about how a buddy would get shot, and he would just walk up to the guy. I think Frank's exact words were, well, you sent my friend to hell, I'm going to send you to hell too. So he would just walk up to someone who has surrendered and just shoot them. Or if, they were on the ground or whatever, I mean, he would just take them out. He had no problem with this sort of thing. Now, keep in mind, he's a young guy. He didn't actually get discharged until I think it was the day before his 25th birthday. So all of this was pre-25.
Wow.
But he would sometimes there were orders by commanders. You take these guys out in the woods here and just make sure they don't come back. And Frank knew what that meant. There were a lot of he had reprisals for concentration camp guards. He said he participated in a lot of that in terms of taking those guys out, and even trustee inmates, he said, from the concentration camps who were obviously prisoners, but they were trustees. They were working with certain guards and things like that. He would kill them. He had no problem, what the Army's term was calculated attempts to dehumanize and degrade POWs. He participated in that quite happily. And later in his life, he said that his time in World War II, which, as I said, was 4 times longer than the average infantryman, he said that's what built up this callousness that helped him later in his second career, shall we say, or third career. He had a certain callousness about the taking of human life. It just didn't bother him the way it bothered a lot of people, which benefited him financially later. But he said as an older man that it all began in World War II for him. Now, Frank had a great ability to keep his lips shut, and that's what got him through a lot of his life. Later in his waning years, which we'll get to here momentarily, I don't want to jump ahead, he did start to confess a lot of this stuff. And one of the things he confessed was a lot of war crimes. But as I said before, he was discharged the day before his 25th birthday in 1945 from the Army. And then he had to go and find work, and that was not necessarily easy. He married really quickly to a woman named Mary Letty. Sorry, Frank, like that shit right there, what I just accidentally slipped, that would get a bullet in my head. So, Frank, wherever you are, relax. I was a slip of the tongue. I was thinking woman, and I was seeing the name Mary, and they just blended together. Mary Letty was his first wife. They had 3 daughters, Mary Ann, Peggy, and Dolores.
And these were the ones, the one daughter who just stares at him in the movie the whole time.
Yeah, that's Peggy. Yeah, that's the middle girl, Peggy.
Yeah.
It reminded me of the girl from Blow. Like, I hate you.
Right. Yeah, it's not a subtle point in the movie they're making.
No. She's just like,
yeah, she's
I'm disappointed in you. I'm disappointed I was born into your family.
Right. Yeah,
it was fantastic.
She's onto him from Jump Street. He actually divorced Mary, though. He had another daughter with a second wife. He had another daughter named Connie. So he wound up with 4 girls. So Frank was not very good at making boys. He was incredibly good at making girls. They were all girls, 4 daughters in his life with 2 different wives. And his second wife was Irene, who is in the movie. They call her Renee, you remember? She's the wife you see the most in the movie, but that was his second wife in actual fact. He got a job as a driver for Food Fair. And it was during this time that he met Russell Bufalino. Russell Bufalino was basically he was sort of like a second in command to a guy named Angelo Bruno. Angelo Bruno was known as the Gentle Don. And to have been so gentle, Angelo Bruno eventually died an incredibly famous and quite violent death. And it's been immortalized in photographs because he was murdered on the streets. He was his thing was, Angelo Bruno's thing was reconciliation. So it's kind of, that's why they called him the Gentle Don. He was the guy that would probably the least likely just to shoot you because he was pissed at you. So ironically enough, he was shotgunned in the back of the head as he sat in his passenger seat of his car on a Philadelphia, South Philly street. And there's famous photographs because, the press were there, and he was shotgunned in the back of the head, and his jaw actually unhinged. So there's photos through the windshield of the car of him like that, and his jaw is hanging so low that it's just an inhumanly gaping mouth, And if you've ever seen the pictures of Angelo Bruno's body, it's pretty haunting because it's just so inhuman looking that his jaw is hanging off in this silent scream that's way too wide for a human. But Russell Bufalino was sort of kind of like his underboss. He met Frank when he helped him fix his truck, which is in the movie. You see that happen. And eventually Frank befriended Russell Bufalino and became his driver and also his delivery man. And actually the first person that Frank murdered for the mafia, according to him, was a guy named Whispers, which, again, you see that in the movie. Whispers pulled a little prank on Frank. What he did was he gave Frank $10,000 to go firebomb a laundry up in the Delaware, I believe. But shouldn't have done that. And Frank did it, but Frank didn't understand that Angelo Bruno, the Gentle Don, had a huge stake in this laundry. And, so Frank comes back and he's brought in and Bruno says, "Why did you firebomb that place in Delaware?" And honestly, Frank probably would have been killed right there, if not for Russell Bufalino, who, as I said before, had taken Frank under his wing. Bufalino was a very small guy. Frank was a very large guy. Like Frank, you see him in the movie, and Robert De Niro plays Frank. And in some scenes, De Niro wore platform shoes, actually. But the actual Frank Sheeran was like 6'5", and he was very big and, definitely a good bodyguard, which is probably no wonder that Hoffa eventually took him in as a bodyguard. But another thing Frank said later that he was involved in was the murder of Crazy Joe Gallo. On Joe Gallo's birthday at Umberto's Clam House, April 7th, 1972. Crazy Joe Gallo was, and it's dramatized very well in the movie, because Joe Gallo, the night of his birthday, really did take his families to go see Don Rickles. And Don Rickles, heckled him a little bit. What's not seen in the movie is he actually went to dinner that night with the actor Jerry Orbach from Law and Order, who is now gone. Well, that was who was with Joe Gallo the night that he was murdered. Luckily for Jerry Orbach, the actor, when they were invited to go to Umberto's Clam House, Orbach was like, "No, it's late. I'm going to go home." So he went home. Joe Gallo went to Umberto's to continue celebrating his birthday and was gunned down in front of everybody with his bodyguard and his wife and children present, right there. And this was in retribution for,
bodyguards can't save you.
No. And according to Frank Sheeran, he did this by himself. He walked in there, killed them all.
In the movie, when I was watching that scene, I was thinking, he didn't listen to Hoffa. He ran and did not charge the gun.
That's right.
He ran from it.
What do you think of Hoffa's advice, Ryan? Would a gun you charge him, with a knife you run? Isn't that what he says?
Yeah, 100% depends on proximity in the situation. Because if you're really close to someone and who's got a gun and you're like, "Oh, well, I think I'll just run away." Well, even a fast human's only going like 17 miles an hour.
Yeah.
So it's very hard to get away. So if you're close, grab the gun. Yeah, get the fuck away from a knife. It's just dumb.
Yeah, I agree.
Unless you also have a knife, in which case go for the eye. Because once you hit the eye, once you hit the eye, the other person's like, "Fuck this shit."
She's like
it's my
to the eye.
Is what I think would happen.
Yeah. Well, I want to go. I'm going to kind of jump from the Joey Gallo thing. We can talk about that a little more when we get into the movie section of this. But I want to bring Hoffa into Frank Sheeran's actual story because Buffalino's cousin was a guy named Bill, and Bill was an attorney, and he happened to be Jimmy Hoffa's attorney. And on our show that we did about Jimmy Hoffa, we talked a little bit about Bill Buffalino. But that's how Sheeran was introduced to Hoffa, was through the cousin of his mentor. And so Hoffa employed Sheeran, being a big guy, as muscle and as a personal bodyguard. And they became really good friends, personal friends. Their families were friends with each other. I'm talking about Sheeran and Hoffa now. And this actually led to Hoffa spearheading Sheeran's career within the International Brotherhood of Teamsters. He never would have been a president of the local 326 in Wilmington, Delaware, if he had not become personal friends with Hoffa. I mean, basically, Sheeran went from the bottom, and he bumped right up, pretty much straight up from, a driver to a bodyguard to the president of a local, which is, impossible if you don't have the backing of someone like, Jimmy Hoffa, which is stated in the movie, and it's absolutely true. And that's this point in time, everybody knew Hoffa. He was, a lot of people say, like, in terms of just pure power, he was second or third only to the president, because if Hoffa said the trucks weren't going to run, deliveries weren't going to get made, though we were going to shut down the ports, that's what happened. And so, you're kind of at the mercy of that. So he had a lot of power in the country at that particular, time. The problem was, that Hoffa got himself out of a lot of shit, but he couldn't get himself out of everything. Ultimately, he did go, to prison. And we can talk about this a little more when we get into the movie as well, because I'm moving toward the actual us talking about the Irishman itself. But long story short, I guess we'll save kind of the stuff about Sheeran and Hoffa for when we're talking about the movie, and we'll talk about how it's depicted there. But I just kind of want to round off the Sheeran section, the real life section of the show, by saying that Sheeran himself, like Hoffa, did not avoid prison time. He and 6 other people in July of 1980, which was after Hoffa's disappearance, he was convicted on racketeering charges, found guilty on 11 counts of them, and he was sentenced to 32 years in prison, of which he served only 13. But 13 years, it's a long time. And actually, the actual Sheeran died of cancer in December 14th of 2003. So he lived a long time. Born in 1920, lived to 2003. Not bad for a man involved with the mafia for the majority of his life. But this is where we start getting into the movies section of this, because before Sheeran was, died of cancer, he eventually started talking to an investigative reporter by the name of Brandt. And Brandt took these interviews he did with Sheeran in a nursing home and compiled them into a book called I Heard You Paint Houses, which was published. And it was sort of, I guess you could say, the posthumous confessions of Frank Sheeran about his life. Well, not long after the book was published, Robert DeNiro was preparing to work with his old buddy, Martin Scorsese, again on a film called The Winter of Frankie Machine, which was an adaptation of a book about a hitman in California. Robert De Niro had directed a film called The Good Shepherd, which was written by Eric Roth, who wrote, many movies, The Insider, which I was in. He wrote Forrest Gump. He wrote a lot of movies. He wrote The Good Shepherd for Robert De Niro. And Eric Roth said, which one? All of
Good
them.
Shepherd.
Oh God, yeah, The Good Shepherd. It's a tough. I'll be honest with you, man. It's a tough one for me to get through. I mean,
I think I tried like 19 times, like over the course of 4 years. I never.
yeah,
I can't.
it's a
It's
hard one.
hard.
It's a hard one. Because
Phone rang.
the Irishman is a long movie, but it's very engaging. The Good Shepherd is long, but it's kind of it trudges, But anyway, that was where Eric Roth and Robert De Niro had worked together on The Good Shepherd. Eric Roth heard he was doing this Frankie Machine movie and said, if you're going to play a hitman, you need to read this as research. And we all know that Robert De Niro loves to research his characters. That's how he gets them so textured, so layered, these performances. And so he was given this book, I Heard You Paint Houses. De Niro read this book and was like, damn, this is the movie I want to make. And he showed it to Martin Scorsese. And Scorsese was like, yeah, this is a really good story. And at that point, as they were getting closer and closer to doing The Winner of Frankie Machine, they seriously started to think about, do we want to do The Winner of Frankie Machine? Or do we want to, sort of take what we've worked on here and see if we can't combine it with this book, but basically do I Heard You Paint Houses? And that's what they eventually decided to do. The only problem was this was like in 2007. So they had to start over developing. So they had to basically throw out The Winner of Frankie Machine, and they had to start developing this new thing, I Heard You Paint Houses, which took a long time. They brought in Steven Zaillian, who wrote Schindler's List and many other movies, to start writing a script. But Scorsese went on to do 3 other movies while they were developing the script. He did Hugo, he did The Wolf of Wall Street, and he did Silence. So a long period of time was passing. De Niro was pushing this project forward. I mean, I think it's safe to say that Robert De Niro really was the spearhead of this movie, because he would not let anybody forget that we're making I Heard You Paint Houses. And he's the one that got Pacino into it. He put together this package. He started talking to Joe Pesci, who retired. And Joe Pesci was sort of like Rick Moranis. Like when he retired. Like he really retired. Mm-hmm. You just never saw him again. Even though he did make a very brief appearance in The Good Shepherd. And I must be honest with you, Ryan, the first time I watched The Good Shepherd, I went through like the DVD thing to find the scene with Pesci, and I watched it. I finally just got to that because I was like, how long into this movie does he show up?
Yeah.
And someone told me he made an album. Yes.
Well, he's a singer. He's done several albums, Joe Pesci, and they're not bad, actually. Some of them are really funny. I got to send you some of Joe Pesci's songs, man. I can't believe I've never done that. Yeah, because some of them he like makes fun of his persona too. Like he takes an old song and then he turns it into like a gangster song where he's cussing people out. It's pretty awesome. But during all this time, Pesci was doing. And other than that, Pesci was playing a lot of golf, because we all know Joe Pesci loves to golf. He used to arrange his schedule in movies so that he could.
He's hanging out with Fitz, right?
That's right. Yeah, a lot of golfing in this movie too. So a lot of that stuff was.
That reminds me of like when Randy Savage, just like before he died, like someone, he was like making rap. Like I was like, Macho Man has a rap album. Like how did what?
Yeah, I didn't know that one. Jeez.
Yeah, but I'm gonna say when you told me the Pesci thing, I'm like, what?
Well, that's the weird thing that I never knew. Like before he was an actor, he wanted to be a singer.
An album.
Like that was his thing, is he wanted to be a singer, and then he started acting and things, and that took off. And then he became an actor for years.
Yeah.
Which is weird because you hear Pesci's voice and you don't go, wow, there's a voice. That's a voice I'd love. That's angelic. Get on over here, you little motherfucker, you. You just don't imagine that serenading anyone.
Plus, you would think after so many years of success, you wouldn't be like, you know what, I really need like this mixtape.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's what he did.
Well, he's got the money, so he doesn't have to worry about it. It's just a passion project at that point.
He can do whatever he wants to. But speaking of like the crazy motherfucker thing, the original idea the producers were trying to push for in this was they wanted, if Pesci was going to come back, which like I said, it took a long time to convince him to come back because he was having fun playing golf. The producers thought, oh well, of course, Pesci's going to be in the movie and he's going to play Tony Provenzano, because if you watch the movie and you think of Pesci and Pacino, or Pesci and De Niro and Scorsese, you would think, well, he's going to be the fiery one, like
that's what I liked about the whole thing with all the Goodfellas and the Casino movies, that this was the complete opposite, and they did it perfect. It was perfect.
Yes, and that I think was pretty brilliant, and that was one of Scorsese's things that he demanded. He's like, no, he's not playing Tony Pro. He's going to play Buffalino, because it's because one of Pesci's big one of the things he actually was quoted as saying when De Niro asked him to do the movie is he's like, I don't know, why don't we want to do another gangster thing? Haven't we done that well? Like Pesci's thing was, well, couldn't we just ruin everything we've been doing? Like we've made two really great things, and why are we pushing this? And that was why he drew back for so long. Eventually, they got him to agree to come on board and do the movie, which, I'm just going to throw it out there. Paramount was involved for a while, but they dropped it, and no studio wanted to touch this movie in terms of financing. And that's what took it so long to get made, from 2007 until they started shooting in 2017. It was 10 years. And frankly, they just couldn't figure out who was going to finance the movie. Part of that was because as they got older, Scorsese was very insistent that these actors, the primary actors, play the character throughout the whole movie. The movie takes place over the course of 40 years. He didn't want to have like the characters played by another actor when they were younger. Famously, one of the things makeup can't really do well is make someone look younger. You can make someone look older with makeup, but you can't really convincingly make someone look younger. So they had to figure out how to do that. And that drove the budget up to well over 100. And the final budget on this movie is over $150 million.
Oh, wow. My guess the other day was low.
Yeah, but, at the same time.
I didn't know, though.
But that you have to take into account they had to completely develop a new form of technology to do it. So like ILM developed a new form of computer technology in order to make the faces younger. And a lot of it required doing the facial work without dots. Because generally, when you do someone's face in a movie, you cover their face with dots. And Scorsese was like, guys, we're working with like big actors here, and they're like actors, and they don't want to have their faces covered in like little dots. So is there any way we can do it without the dots? And ILM said, well, I guess you could, but we have to develop a new way of doing that. So they've created all these rigs. The cameras had like 3 lenses on them so that you could register all this information that was coming off of sensors that were basically invisible, that was attached to their clothing, like laser sensors. It was really interesting. But, that's what made the budget so high, I guess is what I'm trying to say. You had to develop new technology in order to even do it.
You would think, though, if that was the case, say you did, right? Like, say that you figure out how to do that, that technology may end up worth more than the movie.
Exactly.
You were worried about the budget this whole time, and now, like that's like someone's empire, just that technology.
Exactly. And that's like the George Lucas thing, what he used to talk about. They were not developing our movie.
Concept.
We got to do it for everyone else's movie too. And so now you can do it because they developed this for The Irishman. Thankfully, after all those years, Netflix came around and agreed to finance the movie and do all the technology and put in the money that you would need to invest in order to make Martin Scorsese's vision a reality. Now, this movie shot from September of 2017 to March of 2018. That's 108 shooting days, 117 locations, which means 108 shooting days. That means they were doing location moves, sometimes 2 a day.
Wow.
Yeah. 319 scenes, and the movie is 3.5 hours long. But it's a damn good 3.5 hours.
Whoever scheduled that's a beast.
I tell you, man, I guess it's a well-oiled machine because I know that Scorsese works with a lot of the same producers.
Yeah.
In fact, the same people who did Silence, his previous movie, did this. This is a totally different movie than Silence. Like Silence is another one of those movies that he was trying to get made for even longer, like 20-something years. Which in Silence I can kind of understand because it's an artful movie. You know how you break down Scorsese's career and. You kind of have the gangster movies, then you have his experimental films, and then you have movies like The Age of Innocence or Kundun or Silence that are just really artful movies. I mean, they're not going to have a huge audience behind them, but it's him doing something different, Mm-hmm. It's not like Cape Fear where everybody just, of course I'm going to go see Cape Fear. Are you crazy? So
I mean,
I
thought more than 17 people should have seen There Will Be Blood. Like, that was pretty good.
Oh God, like There Will Be Blood is one of my favorites of that decade, to be honest with you.
I mean, for getting, didn't it get the Academy Award? And I think I don't know anyone who's seen the motherfucker.
Yeah, I know Daniel Day-Lewis. That was one of his 3 Academy Awards.
It's fantastic. Just fantastic.
I mean, he is so amazing in that movie. Well, and Scorsese and him worked together in the Age of Innocence. But now I'm hoping that maybe he'll reconsider this whole retirement thing. I'm talking about Daniel Day-Lewis because it is awful good whenever he comes out of he does a movie once every 10 years anyway. So maybe 10 years from now he'll rethink this whole I'm retired thing. But I also wanted to say about The Irishman that Robbie Robertson, and I already told you this, Ryan. Robbie Robertson from the band does an amazing score for this movie. I love this score. I mean, I'm talking naturally when the movie begins, you get that classic Scorsese feel because instantly like the old rock, kicks in that very first scene and you go, oh yeah, now I'm back into like Goodfellas land, because Scorsese
instantly too.
Yes. Quick. He is amazing at like picking the right old songs for scenes. Like, I don't know how he does it. Him and Tarantino, they got a good ear for like what song goes with the right scene, because the thing about Scorsese is it wouldn't necessarily be the song that you would naturally choose. And yet when it's laid over the scene, it just seems to fit into the scene so organically, Goodfellas, I keep going back to that, even though he did the same thing in Casino and a number of other movies, and Wolf of Wall Street and a number of others. But yeah, Goodfellas is just one of those movies where like every single song choice is perfectly fitting to whatever the scene is, And this definitely has its share of that. So I guess on that note, we'll jump into talking about the actual movie itself. What did you guys think about the structure of this movie? Because it's a little tricky because it's actually a flashback. It's actually a man telling a story about a man telling a story.
Yeah.
It's very, very interesting. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say sometimes, I mean, once you got in the groove of it, you kind of, but at first you went, wait a minute, because it would show like something with a date and say how they died.
Yeah.
And you're like, wait a minute, what year are we at? And then the scene would continue like, oh, okay, no, they were just telling, that was something the first time they did it, I went, wait, did we jump again? What's going on?
Yeah.
But once you figured out, that was like, oh, okay, I can follow. But the first time it happened, that's what, particularly, I think, like when they were talking about, and then also when they said that Kennedy Sr. had died in 1969, but they were still, President Kennedy's alive. You're like, oh, okay, we didn't jump.
Yeah, they're just telling you what eventually happened to that.
Yeah, what eventually happens,
Yeah, and it's another thing that I kind of almost instantly in the first shot really kind of made me sit up was, you hear the voiceover, which is not unusual for Scorsese. Yeah. He usually uses that sort of, the main character is talking and telling you the story. But I loved where, the camera moves and finds Frank as an 80-year-old man sitting alone in a wheelchair. And the voiceover is going of Frank. And then suddenly the voiceover stops and he begins telling the story as he's sitting in the wheelchair.
Yeah,
and
that was good.
Yeah, I was like, that made me sit up because I'm like, oh, okay, I get it. Now this is his story,
Yeah.
And And it's something that De Niro has said, and Scorsese as well, is that it's not necessarily that we're saying this is what happened, but this is Frank telling his story of what happened.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, okay, so this is like going to be a real first person movie.
Yeah.
And I really dug that. And, like you say, the road trip with the wives smoking, kind of stop every 5 minutes to smoke because Russell won't let him smoke in the car. And I know that they really wanted this movie to be named after the book. And it kind of was jarring at first, but the opening title of the movie is I Heard You Paint Houses. It's not The Irishman. The Irishman is at the very end. But when the opening title comes up, it says, I Heard You Paint Houses, which I guess we can talk about that now because I was talking about the house painter. But it's a euphemism. It's code language that Frank used to say, that he would kill people for money. Paint the room being the blood coming out of the person. And then he would say he does his own carpentry, which means code language for I also get rid of the body. Hence the title of the book. And sort of
one-stop shop. That's
right. I'm your man, basically. He tells Jimmy Hoffa says one of the first things he says is I heard you paint houses, and De Niro says, yeah, and I also do my own carpentry.
Discount with a promo code.
Now, what did you guys think of the de-aging? Did you buy it?
Some scenes it looked a little video game-ish. Sometimes it was kind of the person I was watching with, they used the term uncanny valley a little bit. But
it was a really professional attempt, though. That was my outlook. Like I got what you're saying completely. But I respected this is as good as it can be right now, and they're trying as hard as they can, and it wasn't. It didn't ruin anything. It didn't ruin anything.
In 10 years, you'll look at it, probably go, oh wow, we've come a long way. Sort of like I'm sure you'd look at the X-Men movie where they de-aged, and go, wow, this is so much farther along than what they did then. But still, there was so we were talking about as we're watching it. There's a little bit of a brightness to the face, and some of them. And it was kind of a little bit Xboxy looking, but it was really good for what,
And it's also, it seemed like certain faces took to it a little better.
Yeah.
So there were things with Pesci where I looked at him and part of me was going, I remember what Pesci looked like when he was that age. And Pesci's gotten a lot skinnier now.
Yeah.
So he doesn't really look like Pesci. He looks like a skinny version of young Pesci.
I thought that too. I was thinking, that doesn't look like Pesci from Home Alone.
But if you can take
Why didn't
that
you
out,
use that.
Yeah, exactly. With the cap and all, that little
exactly. Or from My Cousin Vinny, we put him in the suit.
Yeah, but if you can take the old stuff out and just go, well, this is what this character. He was skinny, and his character was. But I think that Pacino. It really looked really good for Pacino, I thought, in terms of the aging.
The one that was De Niro. That's the one I said when it kind of jarred me. There was one scene, it was kind of bright in the scene. That's the one that I'm talking about, looked very like a video game. From a certain angle, it just kind of jolted me. And I can't remember exactly which scene, but it was his face was very bright, and he kind of turned, and when he turned, it just kind of looked
it's one of those things.
Video game De Niro.
It could be one of those things where, too, De Niro is on screen a lot more than the others.
That's true.
He has more opportunity to have
show
moments.
The flaw.
But really
I was secretly hoping one time they were gonna pan over and I would see Scarface. Come on.
Oh, that would be awesome. Yeah.
Just one time, and then go back to normal. That never happened.
The crowd I was with watching it, we were saying that Pacino was stealing the scenes as Hoffa. So, particularly the scene, where he's sitting at the table and the guy wants the apology.
Oh yeah.
And he's just, you think you're better than me? Yeah.
Yeah,
that's a great scene. Well, I'm going to get to that scene momentarily.
The one where he's like, well, what about my million? You have your million. He's like, yeah, but you It was so like I know people like that. Like I've met people like that where they're like, yeah, like we have the exact same problem, but you know the wording is different, so you lose yours. And like I don't see why you don't see that.
Yeah. Well, we can kind of jump
that ice cream.
We can jump into those scenes there. The two scenes that you guys are talking about are like the two confrontations between Hoffa and Tony Pro.
Yeah.
Like there's the one in prison with the ice cream, and that's where it all kind of begins. And, you know, Tony and Hoffa are sent to the same prison, which is not necessarily such a great idea.
No.
They don't care for each other. And it was like, you know, like Ryan was saying, you know, Tony's got his 1.2 mil pension. And he's like, well, and he goes, well, so you forfeited yours too, talking to Jimmy Hoffa. And Hoffa's like, well, no, I didn't forfeit mine. You forfeited yours. And you know he's just twisting that fucking knife in Tony Pro because he didn't like him anyway. And he's not going to help him, he says, when he gets out. So you got that, which ends in a fight where Tony jumps on Hoffa. And then you got like the other side.
Which for the time too, we're thinking, you know, $1.2 million is like that's superstar money back then.
Oh yeah, like you know, when Hoffa finally got out of prison, he had 1.5. That like he could have just lived off of that.
Yeah.
And he
didn't want to.
He wouldn't want to. That was his deadly flaw, I think, his fatal flaw. But the other scene, I mean, that one of my favorite scenes is the scene that you were talking about, where they try to do the reconciliation because Hoffa needs his endorsement to get his job back.
I couldn't actually believe though that they went as far as they went and then started talking again. Like I was like, because you would think at a certain point, like we've already passed the point of ever talking again. I'm gonna fuck you up next time I see you forever. It's on site forever. And then they just like they get to that point and then they're like, okay, but we're gonna reconcile though, like you know, like. Yeah. It was hilarious. I thought it was hilarious because they took each other so far.
Yeah. And those two actors are good. Stephen Graham, who is not an actor I was particularly familiar with prior to this movie, who plays Tony Pro, who incidentally, the actor is British. You never would know from the movie because he does a great American accent. But he's great as Tony Pro.
He's really bright then because you don't know it at all.
Yeah, and apparently he's a fairly well-known actor in Great Britain, but this is like, I think he's going to get a lot more work in America based on this movie because he's damn good.
Wouldn't have even guessed.
No. Oh yeah, he was British. Yeah, like never. I wanted to talk too about.
Fantastic.
I wanted to talk about some of the stuff with. Because the movie, like I say, kind of goes over 40 years, and it does encompass some of the real life things that happen in America. We talk a lot about the Kennedys in it.
Yep. I liked that. Well, I mean, I like that they represented him. Don Rickles.
Yes.
I love that Don Rickles was in it, considering you know.
Yeah, and particularly the past that those guys have, like you know, Scorsese and De Niro having been friends and worked with him in Casino and you know and everything. It's pretty cool that they would kind of honor their friend that way. But it's also historically accurate because that's Joey Gallo really did go to see Don Rickles the night that he died and was kind of heckled by him. But I wanted to talk a little bit about the Kennedy sort of deal, the Giancana, you know, all that being mixed up, how Giancana got JFK elected because he was friends and shared a mistress with Joseph Kennedy. And, you know, they went into the whole thing of the Illinois state voting fraud, allegedly, right, Ryan? Allegedly.
Always.
But I think, let's face it, is this really allegedly anymore? I think it's pretty safe to say that Giancana helped win Illinois for JFK. And the whole idea was that it would be in exchange for getting Castro out of Cuba, because the mafia had huge losses in Havana when they lost all those casinos because of Castro, and they wanted him out of there.
That's the first thing he did.
Yeah.
He got rid of the casinos.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing about Hoffa. As soon as Kennedy gets elected, he has that great line where he was like, "You never trust a millionaire's kid." You know, he didn't like him from Jump Street. But there's a scene in there that, again, it kind of made me sit up. And I don't know if they were intentionally tipping their hat to another great movie. But you know the scene where Frank Sheeran is transporting for the anti-Cuban militants the guns?
Yeah.
And he takes them down, and there's the scene with Howard Hunt. Of course, you don't know it's Howard Hunt yet. Talking about the big ears, because Howard Hunt had his ears, pinned back or whatever. But there's Pesci is saying in voiceover what Sheeran needs to do, and he goes, "You need to go to Florida, and you're going to meet up with a fairy named Fairy." And you go, "Wait a second. Like Joe Pesci in the movie JFK played David Ferry, who is the character that Sheeran meets in this movie. So he's talking about a character in this movie that he played in another movie." For me, I kind of that made me sit up a little straighter, because I was like, "Hey, that was you in that other movie. Yeah, David Ferry." But in this movie, Pesci doesn't seem to have very much affinity for David Ferry, because you know, a fairy named Ferry.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, you have all the big events of the Teamsters history in terms of Frank Fitzsimmons. They fit in him going up there, making him put the flag all the way up. They did. Hoffa was not having that flag at half-mast when Kennedy got.
And he's just over there eating his ice cream when they're talking about the assassination. He's just like, "Oh, okay, I'm going to go here and eat."
Yeah. And they portray some of the people around him as being like, "Well, Jimmy, you're taking this too far." I don't know in real life if they would be so much on Kennedy's side. I don't think Hoffa was the only person there that would have hated Kennedy, considering all that Kennedy had done in terms of kind of stabbing the
not doing
people
what they wanted. Yeah.
And
then you got Bobby going after him, and
any Hoffa movie without Bobby Kennedy, it would not be a Hoffa movie.
No.
I don't know that I'm a huge fan of the Jack Houston. I don't think he looks like Bobby Kennedy. I think he's a little old for the role.
Yeah.
He did the voice fine, but I don't know. It didn't really seem to me like a Bobby Kennedy type performance. But that's just a minor kind of critique. And of course, we could talk about the famous scene now where they're honoring Frank Sheeran, and you have great scenes within that sequence where you have great actors working with one another. Because in that scene is the first scene ever where you get to see Pacino and Joe Pesci on screen together.
Yeah.
All by themselves, having a scene. I mean, I was sitting there watching it like, wow, this is worth the 3 hours it took to get here just to watch them have a scene together.
It reminded me of almost like delayed Abraham Lincoln. Like, you're not going to get it here, but this is all one scene that you're going to die in.
Yeah, that's it.
It's just I don't know. It's a weird way to look at it, but I just when it got to that part, I was like, "It's coming."
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's some pretty heavy foreshadowing there. It has I think probably what is the most infamous, one of those instantly famous lines where it's like it's what it is. When you hear that, you go, well, people are going to be repeating this for years. That's just one of those lines, from a movie. It's what it is. And in that scene, you have an
Max
interesting
Holloway will be very pissed.
Who's that?
Right. Max Holloway says that shit all the time.
Oh, does he really? They stole it from Max Holloway?
Yeah, they Max, you better Max copyright that shit now because it's gone.
And then you had another great scene. Wait, I think that the line that Pacino gives as Hoffa at the end of that sequence when he's talking to Frank, and Frank keeps telling him, it is what it is. So just you kind of have to. It's over. Yeah, stop. But I think that there's a great line that really captures the essence of what got Hoffa killed ultimately, and it's where he says it, and then Pacino looks at him and he goes, "They wouldn't dare," And he has that moment. And you go, well, yeah, I think that's exactly what Hoffa was thinking. I'm such a public figure. I'm on television everywhere. Everybody knows me. They wouldn't kill me, But that's not necessarily. They were warning him for good. Frank was warning him for good reason, because they had every intention, if he didn't back down, to kill him. But do you guys think that at that point it was even an option? You think if Hoffa backed down then, he wouldn't have been killed?
I think most things in the world can be worked out with enough money, and if someone's really, willing to work something out. You know what I mean? It's very few times you go so far where something can't be fixed. When money's involved and intelligent people are involved, usually something, I mean, especially in the modern day, this is less modern day. We're talking, a completely different world when this movie happens. But it's not in the, it's just easier to not kill people. Even if you kill people, it's easier to not kill people. For everybody. So
especially a high profile person like this.
Well, I think if he had when they said retire and he would have just retired, he'd have been.
Because there does come a certain point in this movie where it's clear that he's going to be killed no matter what. It's after that sequence. Yeah. It's when, they're doing the whole road trip, and Frank apparently thinks all this is going to be worked out. But I don't even think by the time they're on the road trip, it seems like the decision's been made that no matter what Hoffa says, whether he meets with Tony Pro or not, they're going to kill him. Like, that's the whole point of this road trip.
Mm-hmm.
And the question then becomes, Frank, are you going to participate and get yourself out of the sort of the oven, or are you going to potentially endanger your own life as well? Which Frank makes a decision and he participates, which in a way is really, that's very complicated. That's very well written, and it's very well acted by these great actors. Because that's
I thought there was a before. Not that I hate to interrupt, but I thought there was an opportunity for like a missed scene there when Frank takes him in the house. Like, you would think, because in a way he tells you, hey, I realize that I'm probably gonna die right now, because he turns around and just, like, his first instinct is to gun out the door. He just wants to get back outside where they just came from.
Yeah.
But at the same token, you could have taken the moment to be like, to turn around, look Frank in the eye, like, really, like, you're gonna shoot me right now, like, you know what I mean? He knew basically right then that he was gonna get killed, and maybe he just didn't want to. It's too hard for a human to think like, oh, like, yeah, I think I'm about to get killed, but it's not this guy though. Like, he doesn't want to believe this guy's gonna shoot him. Maybe that could have been like the reason for that portrayal, but I thought there was like kind of like lost opportunity there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it could have been, I haven't read the book, I Heard You Paint Houses. They could have just been directly portraying it the way Sheeran said it happened. I don't know. Maybe he said that he just turned toward the door and I shot him. I'm not sure. But, yeah, and it's weird that it's not this movie, but it's some film where they keep saying that you'll never see it coming because it's always going to be your best friend that does it in the mafia, And that's definitely the case here in this particular situation. And it's done. That scene is done very dryly, very cold, probably very realistically in a sense. You have the long little bit with the fish where Chucky O'Brien comes and he has the fish in the back of the car, or he's taking the fish out, but the smell of the fish is still in the back. And, so you do bring in that conspiracy theory, because a lot of people have said that Chucky O'Brien had something to do with Hoffa's death. The one thing I did want to clarify, though, and I think it's a little muddled in the movie, is Hoffa keeps saying that Chucky is his son, but in actual fact, Chucky wasn't Hoffa's son, and I don't think they ever say that in the movie. He was the best friend of Hoffa's son, and he was kind of raised like a son by Hoffa. But I think some people I've read, they say, well, even Hoffa's son participated in the murder. It was a family friend who drove the car, but that's not Hoffa's son. Hoffa's son is a different guy, who is actually right now the president of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters, because even as we sit here speaking, Jimmy Hoffa is the president of the Teamsters. He doesn't call himself different. Back. That's right. He's actually the James Hoffa, that is the son, is the second longest running Teamsters president of all time.
And I said in our Hoffa video, Bishop, Daddy is very proud.
I'm sure, yes, Daddy is very proud of his son. But yeah, there are some other things I wanted to talk about here. After the book, I Heard You Paint Houses, came out, it created a lot of, publicity and stuff, obviously, because here's this someone who you can actually connect to Hoffa as being a close personal friend, saying, I killed my friend, Frank Sheeran. So they went to that house where he said it happened, and they found a remarkable amount of blood on the foyer floor. Using the black lights and the chemicals that they use. So they got the residue from this old washed away blood as much as they could get, and they tested it, and come to find out it's not Jimmy Hoffa's DNA, which begs the question, who the fuck got murdered in that foyer? Because somebody got murdered in the foyer.
That was the murder house.
Yeah, I guess that's where you took people. Now, later, they started doing DNA testing again to see if maybe Hoffa's DNA was the blood. The FBI did. And come to find out, that DNA test, the second one, to see if they made a mistake the first time, has never been released. And the FBI continually says no comment. They ask, did the second test come back and it was Hoffa's blood? And the FBI says no comment. So who knows? I mean, maybe it was Hoffa's blood. If it was, it definitely confirms Frank Sheeran's story, because what's the odds?
It's kind of crazy that they wouldn't say.
Yeah, it is weird. I mean, why wouldn't you?
Who's still around that they're...
At this point, though, don't you just go by the best story? I mean, Frank's story is obviously the best. You got Scorsese to do it, so Frank wins.
Yeah, Frank's a good story, and it makes sense, you know. And where did the body go? Yeah, it becomes very simple. They cremated it. I mean, that makes sense. You know? It's what I've thought
for years, because I didn't know that's how they're going to do it in the movie, but it's what I've thought, because it's very hard to have something where everyone on Earth wants to find it and no one can. You know, the most obvious answer is probably the answer that's not here.
They didn't throw him in the wood chipper like the other guy.
Yeah, because Tony Pro threw his one rival in a wood chipper, a la Fargo, only for real. The thing about that we should do one on that movie one day. Kind of in our last minutes, though, I did want to point out that there is a major subplot that goes throughout the movie. Rebecca kind of hit on it a little bit about the daughter, Peggy. And as I said, Frank had 4 daughters. The daughter that's featured most in the movie is Peggy, and Peggy seems to always, from Jump Street, had a handle on her father. Primarily, it probably helped that she watches him beat the fuck out of the grocer down on the corner.
Yeah.
Which
that's
I must say,
started.
Let me just say this. We're talking earlier about the de-aging, and I didn't mind it. But there are a couple scenes where when Robert De Niro walks, I go, that's the walk of a 70-year-old. That's not the walk of a 40-year-old.
That was another thing I thought of. I was like, well, their voices and their movements, you can't de-age.
Right.
You know.
Yeah, and a lot of it's okay, but in the grocer scene where he's beating the shit out of that guy on the street, maybe it's because it's all played in like a wide shot, which is really cool. But he does he's kicking that guy kind of like a 70-year-old dude would, you know.
I figured out who the girl and that little girl grows up to be, though. She was the mom in Blow.
Oh, there you go. It's all connected. Perfect. Yeah.
Did you get my money? The drug money? Yeah, I got it.
Well, she finally gets to talk, because Peggy doesn't do a lot of talking.
No, she just sneers the whole time.
Even when she's played by a well-known actress.
Yes, I know. I was like, surely she'll speak now.
Well, no. I know. I read some criticisms where they're like, oh, this is a guy's movie, and the one female star in it that's in it, and she doesn't talk. But it's like, guys, the point is that she doesn't talk. That's what cuts him to the bone. She won't talk to him.
Yep.
Yeah,
she has nothing to say. Her eyes tell it all.
Yeah, she just stares. She leers. And when he comes at the very end, he's on 2 crutches, and he comes over to her bank window, and she closes the window and walks away. Because, as he says in the movie, the last straw was when Jimmy went, because she liked Jimmy.
Oh.
I think Jimmy, she didn't like Russell. She was on to Russell, too. She was like, you give me these ice skates, I'm just going to leer at you, too. $100 bills, I'm not saying. Not even thinking about that 100. But I tell you what.
Like, Jimmy's really trying to help people.
Jimmy bought her ice cream. That's what the others didn't do. If the others had bought her ice cream, she'd have loved Russell.
They bonded over the ice cream.
Yeah.
Because he ate a lot of ice cream.
But I like that little subplot. I mean, I think maybe Peggy could have talked a little more, but who am I? I'm not, I'm not Martin Scorsese. I'm not Steven Zaley. So
that's right. And they're so big, they can get a big name actress to come and just stare.
Yeah. And
hey,
the fact,
if I was a big name actress, I'd be like, yeah, I'll stare. That's freaking easy. I ain't got to learn lines.
Sure, why not?
Yeah. In a big film.
I mean, I kind of expected maybe it would be like...
I just want the craft food service.
That's right. And that paycheck.
Shit's good.
But anyway, so that's we've pretty much hit our time. We had a lot of stuff to talk about.
Yeah, it's a long
Irishman.
film.
It is. And but hey,
I'm gonna watch it again.
Yes, you should. You should watch it again. I'm gonna watch it
on Christmas Day.
It's a great Christmas film.
Basketball on Christmas.
Okay.
But and everybody out there who's watching this show should definitely watch it as well, because you're not going to see many movies like this come about too often. And just in terms,
it's fantastic. It's worth every minute.
And it's very disheartening. Well, I don't know if this that he could not find the funding for it until Netflix.
Yeah. Well, I mean, me and Ryan were talking about this too. With this sort of a package, I mean, Martin Scorsese directing Robert De Niro, Al Pacino, Joe Pesci. I didn't even mention Harvey Keitel plays Angelo Bruno, going way back with Scorsese to Mean Streets. It's a great cast.
It was like a big Scorsese reunion, like high school reunion.
And it's probably going to be the last one we're going to see of all these guys together.
That's why I didn't want to finish it. I got that feeling that this will never happen again. This is the last time I can ever have a first viewing of it.
Yeah.
I had to watch it in 4 segments because I kept getting interrupted. But the last segment, I just intentionally, I was like, I don't want to see it.
Yeah. It's a good movie, man. I mean, like I say, I know that we are going to get one more Robert De Niro, Martin Scorsese movie next year with Leo DiCaprio.
I was going to say, so is he done with? Because there for a while it was all Leo. You're like, where's Robert? Where's Robert?
Yeah, well now
Wolf of Wall Street was the best though. I love Wolf of Wall Street. They're
all going to be together now in this movie called The Killer of the Flower Moon, which is going to come out next year. And as De Niro has said, this is the 9th collaboration he had with Scorsese, and he said he's very OCD. According to De Niro, has said himself that he's OCD and he wants it to be an even number. So he wants to do an even 10 with Scorsese, and then he'll be satisfied. So the next movie will be an even 10. So he'll at least get the number that he wants in terms of their collaborations. But anyway, that's all we got for today. We'll be back next week. I want to thank Rebecca. Thank you for being here.
Absolutely.
And Ryan, thanks for coming back, man. We're going to be seeing you some more soon. Don't stay away so long next time.
Yeah, I'll try. It's easy. It's easier now though, because before, for anyone who didn't know, which is almost everyone, I wasn't living, where I would actually do your show. I would just be there because it would be impossible for me to go around about the rest of my day, and not make it that far, to at least long story, but basically, it was a much bigger pain in the ass. Now it's much more convenient for me. So,
well, now we'll do more. We're back on our track. And also the audience, thank you guys for watching, and please go see The Irishman. Check it out. And until
really good.
It's great. And until next week, take care of yourselves.